The Xiongnu were a confederation of nomadic peoples who, according to ancient Chinese sources, inhabited the eastern Asian steppe from the 3rd century BC to the late 1st century AD. Chinese sources report that Modu Chanyu, the supreme leader after 209 BC, founded the Xiongnu Empire. After the previous overlords, the Yuezhi, migrated into Central Asia during the 2nd century BC. The Xiongnu became a dominant power on the steppes of northeast Central Asia, centered on an area known later as Mongolia. The Xiongnu were also active in areas now part of Siberia, Inner Mongolia, Gansu and Xinjiang. The relations with adjacent Chinese dynasties to the southeast were complex, with repeated periods of conflict and intrigue, alternating with exchanges of tribute, trade, and marriage treaties. Attempts to identify the Xiongnu with later groups of the Western Eurasian steppe remain controversial. The identity of the ethnic core of Xiongnu has been a subject of varied hypotheses because only a few words, mainly titles and personal names, were preserved in the Chinese sources. The name Xiongnu may be cognate with that of the Huns and/or the Hunna, although this is disputed. Other linguistic links, all of them also controversial, proposed by scholars include Iranian, Mongolic, Turkic, Uralic, Yeniseian, Tocharian, or multi-ethnic. History. Early history. An early reference to the Xiongnu was by Sima Qian, who wrote about the Xiongnu in the records of the Grand Historian, drawing a distinct line between the settled Huaxia people to the pastoral nomads, characterizing it as two polar groups in the sense of a civilization versus an uncivilized society. The Yuezhi distinction. Sources from the pre-Han eras often classified the Xiongnu as the Hu people. Even though this was more a blanket term for nomadic people in general, it only became an ethnonym for the Xiongnu during the Han. Ancient China often came in contact with the Shan and Zhejiang nomadic peoples. In later Chinese historiography, some groups of these peoples were believed to be the possible progenitors of the Xiongnu people. These nomadic people often had repeated military confrontations with the Shang and especially the Zhou, who often conquered and enslaved the nomads in an expansion drift. During the Warring States period, the armies from the Qin, Zhao, and Yan states were encroaching and conquering various nomadic territories that were inhabited by the Xiongnu and other Hu peoples. Qin's campaign against the Xiongnu expanded the Qin dynasty's territory at the expense of the Xiongnu. In 215 BCE, Qin Shi Huang sent General Meng Tiyun to conquer the Xiongnu and drive them from the Ordos Loop, which he did later that year. After the catastrophic defeat at the hands of General Meng Tiyun, the Xiongnu leader Tumen was forced to flee far into the Mongolian plateau. The Qin Empire became a threat to the Xiongnu, which ultimately led to the reorganization of the many tribes into a confederacy. Xiongnu tribes Chabei, Huyan, Lan, Luondi, Qiulin, Suabu, state formation in 209 BCE, 3 years before the founding of Han China. The Xiongnu were brought together in a powerful confederation under a new Chanyu, Modu Chanyu. This new political unity transformed them into a more formidable state by enabling formation of larger armies and the ability to exercise better strategic coordination. The Xiongnu adopted many of the Chinese agriculture techniques such as slave labor for heavy labor, or silk like the Chinese, and lived in Chinese-style homes. The reason for creating the confederation remains unclear. Suggestions include the need for a stronger state to deal with the Qin unification of China that resulted in a loss of the Ordos region at the hands of Meng Tiyun, of the political crisis that overtook the Xiongnu in 215 BCE when Qin armies evicted them from the pastures on the Yellow River. After forging internal unity, Modu expanded the empire on all sides. To the north he conquered a number of nomadic peoples, including the Dingling of southern Siberia. He crushed the power of the Donghu people of eastern Mongolia and Manchuria, as well as the Yuezhi in the Hexi corridor of Gansu, where his son, Jiaju, made a skull cup out of the Yuezhi king. Modu also reoccupied all the lands previously taken by the Qin general Meng Tian. Under Modu's leadership, the Xiongnu threatened the Han dynasty, almost causing Emperor Gansu I, Han Emperor, to lose his throne in 200 BCE. By the time of Modu's death in 174 BCE, the Xiongnu had driven the Yuezhi from the Hexi corridor, killing the Yuezhi king in the process and asserting the presence in the western regions. The Xiongnu were recognized as the most prominent of the nomads bordering the Chinese Han Empire and during early relations between the Xiongnu and the Han. The former held the balance of power, according to the Book of Han, later quoted in Du and Chengxi's 9th-century miscellaneous morsels from Liang. Also, according to the Hanshu, Zhuang and others were sent as envoys to pay a visit to the Xiongnu. According to the customs of the Xiongnu, if the Han envoys did not remove the tallies of authority, and if they did not allow their faces to be tattooed, they could not gain entrance into the yurts. Wang Wu and his company removed the tallies, submitted to tattoo, and thus gained entry. The Shani looked upon them very highly. Xiongnu hierarchy after Modu. Later leaders formed a dualistic system of political organization with the left and right branches of the Xiongnu divided on a regional basis. The Shani, a ruler equivalent to the Emperor of China, exercised direct authority over the central territory. Longcheng, near the Orkhon inscriptions in modern Mongolia, became the annual meeting place and served as the Xiongnu capital. The ruler of the Xiongnu was called the Chani. Under him were the Tuchi kings. The Tuchi king of the left was normally the heir presumptive. Next, lower in the hierarchy came more officials in pairs of left and right: the Guli, the army commanders, the great governors, the Donghu and the Gudu. Beneath them came the commanders of detachments of 1,000, of 100, and of 10 men. This nation of nomads, a people on the march, was organized like an army. Yap, apparently describing the early period, places the Chanyu's main camp north of Shanxi, with the Tuchi king of the left holding the area north of Beijing and the Tuchi king of the right holding the Ordos Loop area as far as Gansu. Gruset, probably describing the situation after the Xiongnu had been driven north, places the Chani on the upper Orkhon River near where Genghis Khan would later establish his capital of Karakoram. The Tuchi king of the left lived in the east, probably on the high Kailan River. The Tuchi king of the right lived in the west, perhaps near present-day Uliastai in the Kangai Mountains. The marriage treaty system in the winter of 200 BCE, following a siege of Taiyuan, Emperor Gaozu of Han personally led a military campaign against Modu. At the Battle of Beiding, he was ambushed reputedly by 300,000 elite Xiongnu cavalry. The emperor was cut off from supplies and reinforcements for 7 days, only narrowly escaping capture. The Han Chinese sent princesses to marry Xiongnu leaders in their efforts to stop the border raids. Along with arranged marriages, the Han sent gifts to bribe the Xiongnu to stop attacking. After the defeat at Pingcheng, the Han emperor abandoned a military solution to the Xiongnu threat. Instead, in 198 BC, the courtier Lu Jing was dispatched for negotiations. The peace settlement eventually reached between the parties included a Han princess given in marriage to the Chani, periodic gifts to the Xiongnu of silk, distilled beverages and rice, equal status between the states, and the Great Wall as mutual border. This first treaty set the pattern for relations between the Han and the Xiongnu for 60 years. Up to 135 195 BC. The treaty was renewed 9 times, each time with an increase in the gifts. In 192 BC, Modu even asked for the hand of Emperor Jiao's widow Empress Luji. His son and successor, the energetic Jiyu, known as the Liang Chanyu, continued his father's expansionist policies. Liang succeeded in negotiating with Emperor Wen terms for the maintenance of a large-scale government-sponsored market system. While the Xiongnu benefited handsomely from the Chinese perspective, marriage treaties were costly, humiliating, and ineffective. Liang showed that he did not take the peace treaty seriously. On one occasion his scouts penetrated to a point near Shangan. In 166 BCE he personally led 140,000 cavalry to invade Anding, reaching as far as the imperial retreat at Yong. In 158 BCE, his successor sent 30,000 cavalry to attack Shangdang and another 30,000 to Yunzhong. The Xiongnu also practiced marriage alliances with Han Dynasty officers and officials who defected to the side. The older sister of the Chanyu was married to the Xiongnu general Zhao Xin, the Marquis of Shi, who was serving the Han Dynasty. The daughter of the Chanyu was married to the Han Chinese general Li Ling after he surrendered and defected. The Yenase Khiruge's Khagans claimed descent from Li Ling. Another Han Chinese general who defected to the Xiongnu was Li Guangli, who also married a daughter of the Chanyu. When the Eastern Jin dynasty ended, the Zhabe Northern Wei received the Han Chinese Jin prince Sima Chushi as a refugee. A Northern Wei Zhabe princess married Sima Chushi, giving birth to Sima Jinlong. Northern Liang Xiongnu King Duke Mujian's daughter married Sima Jinlong. War with Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty made preparations for war when the Han Emperor Wu dispatched the explorer Zhang Qian to explore the mysterious kingdoms to the west and to form an alliance with the Yuezhi people in order to combat the Xiongnu. During this time Zhang married a Xiongnu wife who bore him a son, and gained the trust of the Xiongnu leader. While Zhang Qian did not succeed in this mission, his reports of the West provided even greater incentive to counter the Xiongnu hold on westward routes out of China, and the Chinese prepared to mount a large-scale attack using the northern Silk Road to move men and material. While Han China was making preparations for a military confrontation from the reign of Emperor Wen, the break did not come until 133 BC, following an abortive trap to ambush the Chanyu at Mei. By that point the empire was consolidated politically, militarily, and economically, and was led by an adventurous pro-war faction at court. In that year, Emperor Wu reversed the decision he had made the year before to renew the peace treaty. Full-scale war broke out in autumn 129 BC, when 40,000 Chinese cavalry made a surprise attack on the Xiongnu at the border markets. In 127 BC, the Han general Wei King retook the Ordos. In 121 BC, the Xiongnu suffered another setback when Huo Qubing led a force of light cavalry westward out of Longxi and within 6 days fought his way through 5 Xiongnu kingdoms. The Xiongnu Hunye king was forced to surrender with 40,000 men. In 119 BC, both Huo and Wei, each leading 50,000 cavalrymen and 100,000 foot soldiers, and advancing along different routes, forced the Chanyu and his court to flee north of the Gobi Desert. Major logistical difficulties limited the duration and long-term continuation of these campaigns. According to the analysis of Yan Yu, the difficulties were twofold. First, there was the problem of supplying food across long distances. Secondly, the weather in the northern Xiongnu lands was difficult for Han soldiers, who could never carry enough fuel. According to official reports, the Xiongnu lost 80,000 to 90,000 men, and out of the 140,000 horses the Han forces had brought into the desert, fewer than 30,000 returned to China. As a result of these battles, the Chinese controlled the strategic region from the Ordos and Gansu corridor till Opnor. They succeeded in separating the Xiongnu from the Qiang peoples to the south, and also gained direct access to the western regions. Because of strong Chinese control over the Xiongnu became unstable and were no longer a threat to the Han Chinese. Ban Chao, Protector General of the Han Dynasty, embarked with an army of 70,000 men in a campaign against the Xiongnu insurgents who were harassing the trade route we now know as the Silk Road. His successful military campaigns saw the subjugation of one Xiongnu tribe after another. Ban Chao also sent an envoy named Gan Ying to Dakin. Ban Chao was created the Marquis of Dingyuan for his services to the Han Empire and returned to the capital Liang at the age of 70 years and died there in the year 102. Following his death, the power of the Xiongnu in the western regions increased again, and the emperors of subsequent dynasties were never again able to reach so far to the west. Xiongnu Civil War. When a Channy died, power could pass to his younger brother if his son was not of age. This system, which can be compared to Gaelic tanistry, normally kept an adult male on the throne, but could cause trouble in later generations when there were several lineages that might claim the throne. When the 12th Channy died in 60 BC, power was taken by Yuezhi, a grandson of the 12th Chanyu's cousin. Being something of a usurper, he tried to put his own men in power, which only increased the number of his enemies. The 12th Chanyu's son fled east and, in 58 BC, revolted. Few would support Yuezhi and he was driven to suicide, leaving the rebel son, Hu Hanye, as the 14th Channy. The Yuezhi faction then set up his brother, Tuchi, as Channy. In 57 BC, 3 more men declared themselves Channy. 2 dropped their claims in favor of the third, who was defeated by Tuchi in that year and surrendered to Hu Hanye the following year. In 56 BC, Tuchi was defeated by Hu Hanye and committed suicide, but 2 more claimants appeared, Runshen and Hu Hanye's elder brother Zhizhi Channy. Runshen was killed by Zhizhi in 54 BC, leaving only Zhizhi and Hu Hanye. Zhizhi grew in power, and, in 53 BC, Hu Hanye moved south and submitted to the Chinese. Hu Hanye used Chinese support to weaken Zhizhi, who gradually moved west. In 49 BC, a brother to Tuchi set himself up as Channy and was killed by Zhizhi. In 36 BC, Zhizhi was killed by a Chinese army while trying to establish a new kingdom in the far west near Lake Borkash. Tributary relations with the Han. In 53 BC, Hu Hanye decided to enter into tributary relations with Han China. The original terms insisted on by the Han court were that, first, the Channy or his representatives should come to the capital to pay homage, secondly, the Channy should send a hostage prince, and thirdly, the Channy should present tribute to the Han Emperor. The political status of the Xiongnu in the Chinese world order was reduced from that of a brotherly state to that of an outer vassal. During this period, however, the Xiongnu maintained political sovereignty and full territorial integrity. The Great Wall of China continued to serve as the line of demarcation between Han and Xiongnu. Hu Hanye sent his son, the wise king of the right, Shulu Tang, to the Han court as hostage. In 51 BC, he personally visited Chang'an to pay homage to the emperor on the Lunar New Year. In the same year, another envoy, Qijushan, was received at the Sweet Spring Palace in the northwest of modern Shanxi. On the financial side, Hu Hanye was amply rewarded in large quantities of gold, cash, clothes, silk, horses and grain for his participation. Hu Hanye made two further homage trips, in 49 BC and 33 BC, with each one the imperial gifts were increased. On the last trip, Hu Hanye took the opportunity to ask to be allowed to become an imperial son-in-law. As a sign of the decline in the political status of the Xiongnu, Emperor Yuan refused, giving him instead 5 ladies-in-waiting. One of them was Wang Zhaojun, famed in Chinese folklore as one of the 4 beauties. When Yuezhi learned of his brother's submission, he also sent a son to the Han court as hostage in 53 BC. Then twice, in 51 BC and 50 BC, he sent envoys to the Han court with tribute, but having failed to pay homage personally, he was never admitted to the tributary system. In 36 BC, a junior officer named Chen Tang, with the help of Gan Yanshao, Protector General of the Western regions, assembled an expeditionary force that defeated him at the Battle of Yuezhi and sent his head as a trophy to Chang'an. Tributary relations were discontinued during the reign of Yuezhi, corresponding to the political upheavals of the Shin dynasty in China. The Xiongnu took the opportunity to regain control of the western regions, as well as neighboring peoples such as the Wu Huan. In 24 AD, Yuezhi even talked about reversing the tributary system. Northern Xiongnu to the Xiongnu's new power was met with a policy of appeasement by Emperor Guangwu. At the height of his power, Yuezhi even compared himself to his illustrious ancestor, Modu. Due to growing regionalism among the Xiongnu, however, Yuezhi was never able to establish unquestioned authority. When he designated his son as heir apparent by the Raiju king of the right, refused to attend the annual meeting at the Chanyu's court. As the eldest son of the preceding Chanyi, Bai had a legitimate claim to the succession. In A.D. 48, 2 years after Yuezhi's son Punu ascended the throne, 8 Xiongnu tribes in Bai's power base in the south, with a military force totaling 40,000 to 50,000 men, acclaimed Bai as their own Chanyi. Throughout the Eastern Han period, these two groups were called the Kingdom of Southern Xiongnu and the Kingdom of Northern Xiongnu, respectively. In AD 49, Xiongnu, allied with the Wu Huan and Zhabe, attacked the Northern Kingdom. Hard-pressed by the Northern Xiongnu and plagued by natural calamities, Bai brought the Southern Xiongnu into tributary relations with Han China in 50. The tributary system was considerably tightened to keep the Southern Xiongnu under Han supervision. The Chanyi was ordered to establish his court in the Meiji district of Xihe Commandery. The Southern Xiongnu were resettled in 8 frontier commanderies. At the same time, large numbers of Chinese were forced to migrate to these commanderies, where mixed settlements began to appear. The Northern Xiongnu were dispersed by the Zhabe in 85 and again in 89 by the Chinese during the Battle of Ikh-Bayan, in which the last northern Chanyi was defeated and fled over to the northwest with his subjects. Grusat states that around A.D. 155, the northern Xiongnu were crushed and subjugated by the Zhabe. Thus Mongol domination succeeded Turkic. Southern Xiongnu economically, the Southern Xiongnu relied almost totally on Han assistance. Tensions were evident between the settled Chinese and practitioners of the nomadic way of life. Thus, in 94, Anglo Chanyi joined forces with newly subjugated Xiongnu from the north and started a large-scale rebellion against the Han. Towards the end of the Eastern Han, the Southern Xiongnu were drawn into the rebellions then plaguing the Han court. In 188, the Chanyi was murdered by some of his own subjects for agreeing to send troops to help the Han suppress a rebellion in Hebei. Many of the Xiongnu feared that it would set a precedent for unending military service to the Han court. The murdered Chanyu's son Ufuluo, entitled Chijisaiju, succeeded him, but was then overthrown by the same rebellious faction in 189. He traveled to Luoyang to seek aid from the Han court, but at this time the Han court was in disorder from the clash between Grand General He Jin and the eunuchs, and the intervention of the warlord Dong Zhuo. The Chanyi had no choice but to settle down with his followers in Pingyang, a city in Shanxi. In 195, he died and was succeeded by his brother Hukyuan. In 216, the warlord statesman Cao Cao detained Hukyuan in the city of Yi, and divided his followers in Shanxi into 5 divisions: left, right, south, north, and center. This was aimed at preventing the exiled Xiongnu in Shanxi from engaging in rebellion, and also allowed Cao Cao to use the Xiongnu as auxiliaries in his cavalry. Eventually, the Xiongnu aristocracy in Shanxi changed the surname from Luan to Lu for prestige reasons, claiming that they were related to the Han imperial clan through the old intermarriage policy. Post-Han dynasty and the 16 kingdoms. After Hukyuan, in AD 215 to 216, the southern Xiongnu were partitioned into 5 local tribes. Each local chief was under the surveillance of a Chinese resident, while the Shanyi was in semi-captivity at the imperial court. Lu Yuan's northern Han Hukyuan Chanyi assumed the patronymic Lu, reflecting his imperial ancestry. In 304, Lu Yuan became Chanyi of the 5 hordes. In 308, declared himself emperor and founded the Han Shao dynasty. In 311, his son and successor Lu Kong captured Luoyang, and withered the emperor Huai of Jin China. In 316, the emperor Min of Jin China was captured in Chang'an. Both emperors were humiliated as cupbearers in Linfen before being executed in 313 and 318. North China came under Xiongnu rule while the remnants of the Jin dynasty survived in the south at Jiankang. Lu Huai's former Zhao, in 318, after suppressing a coup by a powerful minister in the Xiongnu Han court, the Xiongnu prince Lu Yao moved the Xiongnu Han capital from Pingyang to Chang'an and renamed the dynasty as Zhao. However, the eastern part of North China came under the control of a rebel Xiongnu Han general of Ji ancestry named Shila. Liu Yao and Shila fought a long war until 329, when Lu Yao was captured in battle and executed. Chang'an fell to Shila soon after, and the Xiongnu dynasty was wiped out. North China was ruled by Shila's later Zhao dynasty for the next 20 years. However, the Lu Xiongnu remained active in the north for at least another century. Taifu and Xia. The northern Taifu branch of the Xiongnu gained control of the inner Mongolian region in the 10 years between the conquest of the Tuaba Abe state of Dai by the former Qin Empire in 376, and its restoration in 386 as the Northern Wei. After 386, the Taifu were gradually destroyed by surrendered to the Tuaba, with the submitting Taifu becoming known as the Dugu. Lu Bobo, a surviving prince of the Taifu, fled to the Ordos Loop, where he founded a state called the Xia and changed his surname to Helian. The Helian Xia state was conquered by the Northern Wei in 428–31, and the Xiongnu thenceforth effectively ceased to play a major role in Chinese history, assimilating into the Abe and Han ethnicities. Tongguancheng was the capital of the Xia, whose rulers claimed descent from Modu Chanyu. The ruined city was discovered in 1996 and the State Council designated it as a cultural relic under top state protection. The repair of the Yong'an platform, where Helian Bobo, emperor of the Da Xia regime, reviewed parading troops, has been finished, and restoration on the 31-meter-tall turret will begin soon. There are hopes that Tongguancheng may achieve UNESCO World Heritage status. Duke and northern Liang. The Duke were a branch of the Xiongnu. Their leader Duke Mengzun took over the northern Liang by overthrowing the former puppet ruler Du and Yi. By 439, the Duke power was destroyed by the northern Wei. The remnants were then settled in the city of Gaochang before being destroyed by the Rouran. Interpretation. Barfield attempted to interpret Xiongnu history as well as narrate it. He made the following points. The Xiongnu Confederation was unusually long-lived for a steppe empire. The purpose of raiding China was not simply for goods, but to force the Chinese to pay regular tribute. The power of the Xiongnu ruler was based on his control of Chinese tribute, which he used to reward his supporters. The Han and Xiongnu empires rose at the same time because the Xiongnu state depended on Chinese tribute. A major Xiongnu weakness was the custom of lateral succession. If a dead ruler's son was not old enough to take command, power passed to the late ruler's brother. This worked in the first generation but could lead to civil war in the second generation. The first time this happened, in 60 BC, the weaker party adopted what Barfield calls the inner frontier strategy. They moved south and submitted to China and then used Chinese resources to defeat the northern Xiongnu and re-establish the empire. The second time this happened, about 47 AD, the strategy failed. The southern ruler was unable to defeat the northern ruler and the Xiongnu remained divided.